Hi, I'm John Underhill. Welcome back to Underhill Creations and Casting Solutions. In this short, quick video, I'm in the shop working on some pens, and I thought I'd share with you how I take scraps like these, just small little blocks left over from other projects, and turn them into really nice segmented pens. Very quick and simple. Let me show you. Now, because these are all random widths and sizes, I start by cutting out some just 1-inch wide strips. Now, they don't have to be perfect. As long as I have one straight edge, that'll make it easier for resawing. And I only resaw because these are too small to put through the planer. Alright, so here's what I'm going to do. I've got all of these cut to roughly 1 inch wide. Just makes it easier to resaw. I'm using a 3/8 blade width by 1/6 per inch. Obviously, if you're going to resaw, you probably want something a little bit wider, but this is what I have set up. And I'm going to do it freehand. If you've got a fence, go ahead and do that. But because these are all random thicknesses, what I'm going to do is use one as a guide and just lay my pen down at one spot and move the piece across it. If I were to lay it and then drag my pen from edge to edge, what will happen is if there's any unevenness here, it will transfer here, and then I might not get a straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out freehand, because then I'll take it to the sander and I'll lightly lay this down on a belt sander. So once I get them all sanded, I come back to the bandsaw, and as you notice, they're all different thicknesses, and I've got about 5 or 6 different types of wood, but I want random thicknesses. I don't want them all the same. I want to stagger them up and stack them and layer them so that there's no pattern. It's all just randomness. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to mark off about 1 inch, and I'm going to cut all of these out roughly to 1 inch pieces square, and that will give me something to glue, because they're not all going to be the same pen. If I were going to make identical pens, I'd figure out my pattern out here and I would glue them all up as one board and then cut them. But because I'm going to do random pens, I'm just going to come in here and cut these out to usable pieces. Alright, so once you get them all cut out, then what you have to do is come in here and just kind of figure out your pattern. I always start with the thickest pieces at the end of the tube, and I always have a spare tube up there so I know how many pieces I need to stack. And then I'm just going to kind of look at random thicknesses and start putting things together in a rough idea of what I want. I'm going to alternate some wood colors, slip in some thin ones, and in this case I've got cherry purple heart, yellow heart, padauk, walnut, maple, and some oak. So again, I like to use randomness, and this way I can just kind of stack things together. And I always make it about 1/4 inch longer than what I need. As you can see, this will extend past the tube. It will give me just enough to epoxy my tubes in and turn the pen. Once I get them all picked out, I kind of stack them together and I move the rest of the pieces out of the way. That way I like what I have and I don't mess it up. Alright, so next what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a 1/8 drill bit, and I picked that size because it's roughly the same as this bamboo skewer that I picked up at the dollar store. And I'm going to drill a hole approximately in the center of each of these pieces. It doesn't have to be exact because we're going to re-drill this with our pen tube size, but I want to just kind of eyeball it to get it as close to center. I want to keep them all in order as I do this. Alright, so next what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the bandsaw table as a nice flat smooth surface, and I'm going to lay each of these down, and I'm using 330 grit sandpaper. But I just rub over the surface, and what that does, it knocks down any of the cut edge debris and any of the hole drill debris. So this way, we know that they're going to fit together nice and smooth. And as you can see, I keep them all in order. I just kind of stack them up. You don't need a heavy grit, just something to knock those wood fibers down so you can glue these together. All right, so here's what I've got. I've got my woods now all laid out in order. I've got my bamboo skewer cut so that it fits inside the pieces and won't obstruct my clamping. I'm going to use some Titebond wood glue. And I'm going to just start out and glue each piece together. And this is going to take a bit, so I will show you how I start them out. And the nice thing about doing them flat like this, it allows you to position my grains to where all my end grains line up together. Now you could spin them if you wanted, do something different, but in this case I just want my end grains to line up. So I'm going to use more glue than I need because I want it to squish out the sides and make sure I have a really good bond for turning. And again, there's no rhyme or reason on sides with these. So I'm just going to pick them up and glue them in order. Alright, so there's our pieces all glued up together. And what I like about that stick is you notice it just kind of holds everything in place. Nothing's falling over, and when I clamp these, I don't have to be concerned about any of them squishing out one direction or another. I'm able to just get the clamp on them straight and secure it. Close up all them grooves so that the glue squirts out, and I know I'm getting good glued surface. Alright, so it's been 7 hours. I just took them off the clamp, and I'm going to take these to the lathe. I have a couple options. I could trim these on the bandsaw. I could push them down on the belt sander if I wanted, but what I'm going to do is, because I have these dowels in them that I know are perfectly set, well, that are center enough, I'm going to put my center and tailstock on these and turn them and just kind of even them up and make them nice and straight. That way I can put them in my vise for drilling. Alright, so here they all are now. I just didn't turn them perfectly round. There's still some flat edges on there, but I didn't need them perfectly round. I just needed them round and straight enough that I can hold them in my chuck so that I can drill them on the lathe with my Jacobs chuck and tube them up for the Sierras. You could also do that on your drill press if you wanted, but I get much straighter, more precise drilling on the lathe, so I opt to do that, especially when a blank like this, if you were off and your tubes went in maybe not straight but a little canted, all of these stripes are going to be canted then on the finished pen. So I'm going to drill these on the lathe. Alright, there we go, all the way through. Alright, now that I've got them all drilled, I'm going to use some 2-part epoxy. And this is the 5-minute stuff in a plunger. It comes out equal parts of A and B, so I don't have to worry about adding extra of one or not enough of the other one. And I'm using another bamboo skewer. As you can see, these are widely used in my shop. They're great little tools. They make great little stir sticks as well. Get this mixed up nicely. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to coat the inside from both ends. And then I'm going to take the brass tube, roll it in one end. As you can see, I don't plug my tubes. I clean them before I turn them, and I'll show you when we get to that part. But as I put it in, I'm just going to rotate it, pull it out a little bit. You can see that the whole tube is getting coated. And then I'm going to take this excess and just kind of push it up over the brass tube. Push it in with my finger. Wipe off the excess. I blow through the tube. It blows the excess out the back side. And as long as I clean off the stick before I put it in there, I can scrape out the extra epoxy and use that on the next tube. And now my tubes are pretty fairly clean. What I have to worry about now is just centering my brass tube in there so that I have the depth right. And in this case I used wide pieces at both ends, and that was the plan, so it allowed me enough room to manipulate where I wanted the brass tube. So now I'm just going to set that aside and let that cure overnight, and in the meantime I'll finish these other three. Alright, I let these sit overnight. The epoxy is nice and cured. Now what I'm going to do is clean up whatever little bit of epoxy I left in the tubes, and I do that by taking a pair of scissors, and I take the straight edge here, the thinnest side, and I'm going to put it in the tube, but I'm not going to just put it straight in, because as you can see, I don't want to stretch the tube out, right? I don't want to put stress on the flange. I want this flat edge to rest along the tube. So I never insert it all the way in. I just kind of hold it out here, and then I'm putting pressure across the top of the blank so that the whole edge scrapes it and then cleans it out. And I do this to both sides, and what that does, it just cleans off any residual leftover epoxy on the side of that tube, so when I assemble this pen, the wood doesn't crack. Also, I'm going to use a pen mill on these, so when I flatten and I face the surface here, the pen mill doesn't get gummed up by the epoxy inside and get stuck in there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some ultra thin glue boost and I'm going to seal this wood. And I just put a little bit on there and kind of spread it around with the tip. And what I want that to do is soak in the wood pores, and that way it'll seal the end grain, so as I'm doing my wet sanding on the surface, water doesn't wick in underneath my finish and cause me any problems. Once it soaks in, I know it's soaked in as far as it's going to get. I just give it a short, quick burst of glue dry, and that's just enough so that it's dry to the touch, and then I flip it over and I do the other side. Alright, so now I've got my mandrel turning between centers, my Sierra bushings. I'm going to fit this up here, mount this on my lathe, nice and snug, set my tool rest, make sure it's clear, and now I'm going to get my tool. Now in this case you've got a couple options. Whatever tool you're most comfortable with, but we have to remember one thing: you're going to be turning some end grain because our wood grain is running back and forth. It's not running lengthwise of the blank like we're used to, so we're not normally having to cut into end grain like on this pen blank, as you can see these rougher areas. So that's going to cut a little harder, so you're going to want to use nice sharp tools, and I'm going to get this down to size close with a square carbide, the Easy Wood square carbide. It will allow me to just come in here and work both directions, get it all nice and close, and then I'll switch over to a skew. Alright, now that we've got it down close, you can really see the difference in the wood color. The types of woods that we're using in here are also much different compared to each other for the density and the cutting ability. So the red padauk cuts much easier than the oak and the purple heart. They're a little harder. The cherry, not too bad, but they all cut different from each other. So by using the carbide, it allows me to just sweep across all of them gradually, take a little off at each time without tearing all this out. Now as you look at it, if you start to see your end grain is rough, what I like to do is this. I'll take some ultra thin and drizzle over those areas. Be careful, you don't want to glue your bushings to the wood, and I'm not trying to get it on the bushings. I'm just trying to get it on some of the wood here, and we're just going to kind of let all of this soak into these end grain areas, and that will kind of stabilize those areas and allow us to cut them a little easier without any potential tear outs. So I'll coat that and just kind of let it soak in a little bit. Also, if you notice, we're not doing any sanding yet. I don't want these colors to bleed into each other. I want to keep the colors only on the woods that they're supposed to. And if I'm not careful, the red from the padauk will travel over into the cherry and the maple, and I don't want to contaminate those. So by putting on this glue, this will kind of help hold all that together. And now I can go over with the skew and get a nice clean final cut. Alright, there we go. Now we've got a nice smooth finish cut. We don't have any tear outs on our end grain. Everything looks nice. And now we're ready to put a finish on that. Now you can go over these and wipe them down with acetone or denatured alcohol if you want. Just don't use too much because you don't want the moisture to bleed in and it will soak in. In this case, I'm just going to lightly seal each individual wood, and I'll show you how I do that. So now we're going to switch to our finishing bushings, and these are the plastic Delrin. That way if you get any CA on them, they're not going to stick. Now if you don't like to use CA and you're using lacquer, that's fine as well. Just be careful about the wood bleeding. I like to seal it all real well with this thin CA. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the lathe on low. This is probably around 700. Now if you can see, there is some color in this wood that's going to bleed if you're not careful. So I'm just going to come in here, put a little bit of glue on the rag, the ultra thin, and just touch down to it and let it soak in. I'm not wiping across it, I'm just touching underneath of it. That way I'm not moving color across the blank, and hopefully this will now soak in and kind of preserve everything right where it is. And I'll do that a couple of times before I put my final finish on. And each time you do it, you'll notice the blank gets a little shinier, so you know it's building a nice finish on top. So now that it's sealed, I can move to the thin or the medium, whichever you prefer. In this case, I'm going to use the thin, and I'm going to go across this a couple times and put about 4 coats. Alright, now that it's dry, I'm going to go over this with 600 grit, a light touch, and all I want to do is just kind of smooth it all out. There are some open grain areas because of the orientation of the grain in this, and your face grain or the end grain showing here against the face. I'm going to sand this all down nice and smooth. I'm going to turn the lathe up a little bit, probably about 1,000 to 1,200, and just come under here, and all I'm doing is smoothing out the glue. I'm not trying to get down to wood. I want to leave the glue on there. I just want a smoother surface. So it doesn't take much. You look at it and see any shiny spots that you see that are left, those are low spots. So now what I'll do is I'll go back to the ultra thin and put a couple coats over top of that. That'll fill in any of those scratching marks and level everything out, and then we'll be good to finish. I'm going to turn the lathe back down. Goes on very easily. So I'm using the ultra thin now as a top coat scratch filler. Yeah, we'll do 3. There we go. Alright, and there's our CA finish. Now all we have to do is polish it, micro mesh it. In this case, I'm going to use the 9-step micro mesh with a little bit of water. I'm going to switch back to my metal bushings. Now as you touch this, you might feel a little bit of roughness from any glue that got on the edge. So what I do, I'll take a flat surface on the lathe and I'll stand that pen on it, that barrel on it. Let me see if I can do it so you can see it. I'll stand the barrel on it and just drag it across. And I'll rotate it and then I'll do it a second time. I'll do that to both ends. And what that does, it just knocks off those glue ends. Another thing you can do is kind of hold it up here and just spin it on there. All you want to do is knock that glue down, but you don't want to remove it. You just want to knock it down, any of those edges that you left. So, alright, we'll put it back on the metal bushings. I cover the bed so that way I'm not getting water on it. And I'm using a dropper bottle. And this is the micro mesh that I use. There's a few different kind out there, whatever one you like. I'm going to turn the lathe back up to about between 1,000 and 1,200. All I'm going to do is put a drop on the rag. I'm not going to overload it, just a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of add some moderate pressure and work across the blank. And as you can see, a little slurry builds up. So I'll do that with all 9 grits. Just a drop on each. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take a cloth, a soft cloth, and some Yorkshire grit. I'm going to put just a little bit, that's way too much. I'm going to put just a little bit on there, turn the lathe on, and I'm going to just come under here and just kind of buff it in there. And this acts as a scratch remover and a final polisher. And I take a dry side of the rag and just kind of wipe it all off. And there we have it, nice and smooth. Now if you wanted to take it a step further, you could take it to the buffing wheel, but that's if you feel it necessary. Only thing left to do now is assemble it. I'm using the Diamond Neuro Ballpoint Tie Gold and Chrome from Exotic Blanks, and I'm upgrading the ink to the Easy Flow 9000. I think it writes much nicer. I always make sure that the twist mechanism works properly before I assemble everything. And now I need to look at the blank to figure out what I want to be top or bottom. I can do that by placing it on here. And I think I like it like that. So I always apply a little bit of Loctite on the inside of the tube, on the top, and around the ring. That way when it's all pressed together and sets up, this spring, or this clip, won't spin. Now I want to make sure that my face grain is, the part that's glowing is out, and that this clip is going to cover the end grain where it gets a little dark from the light. And that's it. And there's our pen. Alright, well that sums it up. Pretty simple, I hope. There's just a few things you got to think about along the way, but I hope I was clear with all that. Here's a picture of the finished pens. I'll let you decide which one you think looks best. For you guys that are selling pens, this is a great way to maximize your profits by using up all those little scraps that you have laying around. When it comes to segmenting, sky's the limit. You can have all sorts of fun. As always, thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like what you've seen, please give me a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos here from Underhill Creations and Casting Solutions. Thanks for joining.